The annual Westfield Elite Horse Auction was in full swing, a gathering of the wealthiest breeders, investors, and aristocrats in the equestrian world. The scent of expensive perfume and aged whiskey filled the air as impeccably dressed men and women exchanged calculated smiles and firm handshakes. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the opulent venue where champagne flowed freely and diamonds glittered on manicured fingers. Among the distinguished guests, a single woman stood out, not because of her wealth or prestige, but because of her condition. Morgan Hayes, her belly swollen with late-stage pregnancy, slipped through a side entrance almost unnoticed. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her attire modest yet clean, worn riding boots, dark jeans that accommodated her growing bump, and a navy blazer that had seen better days. While others socialized and flaunted their status, Morgan moved with quiet purpose from stall to stall. Her eyes held a sharpness that contrasted with her gentle appearance as she studied each horse with remarkable intensity. Her weathered hands traced the outlines of strong muscles and sturdy legs, her fingers occasionally pausing to note something in a worn leather journal. When she approached the third stall, Morgan's expression shifted. The gleaming black stallion inside preened under the attention of wealthy admirers, but her focus remained on its hind legs. She made a quick note, muttering something under her breath that caught the attention of a nearby seller. The man's patronizing smile faltered as Morgan pointed out subtle signs of early splints that even their veterinarian had missed. His eyes narrowed, reassessing this pregnant woman who spoke with unexpected authority. A ripple of whispers followed her movement through the auction floor. Who is she? Perhaps someone's assistant taking notes? A veterinary student? A journalist writing a piece on elite horse culture? Not once did anyone consider she might be competition. When she paused to examine a chestnut mare with a white blaze, Reginald Westfield himself, owner of the largest breeding operation in 3 states, noticed her intent gaze. With a dismissive glance at her swollen belly, he chuckled to his companions. A pregnant woman at a high-stakes auction was amusing enough, but her serious examination of the horses was downright laughable. As the auction starting bell rang, Morgan took a seat in the back row, one hand resting protectively over her unborn child, the other gripping her notebook. The wealthy patrons filed into their reserved seats, some casting curious glances her way, others ignoring her completely. None suspected that the unassuming pregnant woman in their midst would soon change everything they thought they knew about horses, about breeding, about determination, and about judging someone before they showed their true worth. The tension in the auction hall shifted as 3 handlers struggled to lead the next lot into the ring. The magnificent black mare, with a single white sock, fought against her lead ropes, nostrils flaring, muscles rippling beneath her gleaming coat. Tempest had arrived, and her reputation preceded her. The crowd murmured as the powerful animal tossed her head, wild eyes scanning the gathered elites with what could only be described as contempt. The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously as the handlers finally positioned the mare in the center ring. He began his practice speech, highlighting her impeccable bloodline, sired by Triple Crown winner Midnight Commander, out of the legendary broodmare Duchess of York. Her conformation was flawless, her potential unlimited, if only someone could control her. Tempest punctuated this point by rearing suddenly, causing one handler to stumble backward and several women in the front row to gasp. When the opening bid was announced at $50,000, a pittance for a horse of such breeding, the room filled with knowing glances. Several buyers made cautious bids, each carefully considering the investment against Tempest's notorious reputation. The price inched upward reluctantly, none willing to commit fully to the magnificent but seemingly unmanageable animal. At $75,000, a paddle raised from the back row. Morgan Hayes, her pregnant form, outlined by the spotlight that swung in her direction, held her bidding number high, with unwavering confidence. A moment of stunned silence was quickly replaced by amused chuckles and outright laughter. Reginald Westfield snorted into his champagne, while his son Blake mockingly raised his opera glasses to better observe this unexpected entertainment. "Is she serious?" someone whispered loudly enough for all to hear. "Perhaps she doesn't understand the bidding process," another suggested with a smirk. The auctioneer hesitated before acknowledging her bid, his expression betraying his doubt that she could possibly back it. Blake Westfield raised his paddle, casually increasing the bid while sending a patronizing smile toward Morgan. To everyone's surprise, she immediately countered. The laughter grew more uncomfortable as this bizarre bidding war continued. Morgan's face remained impassive, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other raising her paddle without hesitation each time Blake bid. At 120,000, Blake turned to his father with raised eyebrows. Reginald nodded slightly. A horse of Tempest's bloodline was worth securing, even if only to prevent this absurd pregnant woman from making a terrible mistake. When Blake made his final bid, the room waited for the inevitable. Instead, Morgan stood, her movement drawing all eyes as she approached the auctioneer's podium. From her simple handbag, she withdrew a cashier's check, handing it over without a word. The auctioneer's eyes widened as he examined it, then looked back at the pregnant woman with newfound respect. "Sold to Miss Morgan Hayes," he announced, his voice cutting through the now silent room. The auction house hummed with whispers as Morgan Hayes signed the final paperwork for Tempest. Her signature, once familiar on championship certificates and training contracts, flowed across the page with practiced ease. The auctioneer studied her face, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes. The name Hayes carried weight in certain circles, though it hadn't been uttered at events like this for nearly 2 years. He glanced from the pregnant woman to the troublesome mare pawing at the ground nearby, pieces falling into place in his mind. "Wasn't there a champion trainer named Hayes who disappeared years ago?" someone murmured nearby. The question rippled through the crowd, memories stirring among the older members of the equestrian elite. Morgan kept her eyes down, focusing on the paperwork while the whispers swelled around her. The pregnancy, the sudden reappearance, the audacious bid on a horse no one else would risk taking on. It all made for delicious speculation. As Morgan finished the transaction, flashes of her former life surfaced like fragments of a broken mirror. 5 years ago, her name had been synonymous with excellence in the racing world. At just 26, she had trained 3 Derby contenders and countless jumping champions. Her methods were revolutionary, her insight into equine psychology unmatched. The Hayes touch, they called it. Horses that others had written off as unmanageable became stars under her guidance. She had been unstoppable until the night of the Governor's Cup. The memory still burned. Morgan accepting the trainer's trophy, champagne flowing, cameras flashing. James Westfield approaching with congratulations that turned into something more as the night progressed. Their secret affair had lasted months before Blake discovered them. The threats that followed, the ultimatum from Reginald Westfield himself, disappear or watch her reputation and career be systematically destroyed. No one refused the Westfields, not if they wanted to work with horses again. Morgan led Tempest toward the waiting trailer, the mare surprisingly compliant under her touch. The simple act of leading a horse from an auction ring. How many times had she done this before? Yet never like this, never 7 months pregnant with her heart pounding and her future balanced on a knife's edge. She had sacrificed everything once for the sake of pride and fear. Now she was back, her life savings poured into a modest farm an hour outside of town, and this one magnificent troubled mare. As she loaded Tempest into the trailer, Morgan caught Blake Westfield, watching from across the lot, his expression a mixture of amusement and calculation. He didn't know yet, couldn't know, whose child she carried. By the time he figured it out, she would have already begun rebuilding what his family had taken from her. one horse, one race, one victory at a time. The trailer door closed with a decisive click. Morgan Hayes, once celebrated trainer, now pregnant pariah, climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Behind her, the auction house continued to buzz with speculation. Ahead lay a rundown farm, a reputation to rebuild, and a reckoning 2 years in the making, on her own terms this time. The morning sun broke over Hamilton Creek Farm, illuminating its weathered fences and neglected fields. Morgan Hayes leaned against the paddock gate, one hand pressed against her mouth, as another wave of nausea rolled through her body. 7 months pregnant, and still battling morning sickness that seemed determined to last all day. She swallowed hard, steadying herself before entering the small training area where Tempest paced restlessly. The magnificent black mare snorted at Morgan's approach, muscles tensing beneath her gleaming coat. Without warning, Tempest charged the fence line, hooves thundering against the earth, before skidding to a halt mere inches from the boundary. Seconds later, she retreated to the farthest corner, ears pinned flat against her head, eyes wild with distrust. Morgan recognized the pattern: aggression followed by withdrawal, attack followed by retreat. The mare's behavior mirrored the emotional walls Morgan herself had built since fleeing the racing world 2 years ago. Both carried unseen burdens, Morgan the child growing within her, and the secrets that haunted her. Tempest the scars of previous handlers evident in the thin white lines across her flanks that spoke of whips and harsh bits. For 5 days, progress remained elusive. Morgan would enter the paddock, speaking in low, even tones. Tempest would charge, retreat, charge again. The mare refused feed from Morgan's hand, rejected any approach, fought against even the softest lead rope. Each evening, Morgan returned to the small farmhouse alone, exhausted and questioning her decision to stake everything on this troubled animal. By the 6th day, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Morgan's bones ached with the coming storm, her pregnant body more sensitive to the changing pressure. Still, she made her way to the paddock, determined to try again, despite the first heavy raindrops beginning to fall. The downpour came suddenly, sheets of water drenching the landscape. Morgan sat on an overturned bucket in the center of the paddock, making no move toward Tempest, who watched warily from her corner. Rain plastered Morgan's hair to her face, soaked through her clothes, but she remained still, simply talking to the mare, as if they were old friends. She spoke of championships won and lost, of midnight gallops under starry skies, of betrayal and heartbreak, and starting over. She spoke of the child within her, of hopes and fears and second chances. The words were carried away by the storm, but their essence remained, hanging in the rain-soaked air between woman and horse. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps something in Morgan's quiet vulnerability finally reached through. Tempest's ears flicked forward, her nostrils flared. With cautious steps, she approached the seated woman, each movement deliberate, testing. Morgan remained perfectly still, her voice never faltering, even as her heart raced. The mare stopped before her, rain streaming down her midnight coat. For a long moment, they simply regarded one another, woman and horse, both scarred, both uncertain. Then, with gentle deliberation, Tempest lowered her proud head and rested it against Morgan's shoulder, her warm breath mingling with the cool rain. Two mothers-to-be, finding trust amid the storm. The crunch of tires on gravel broke the morning quiet at Hamilton Creek Farm. Morgan looked up from grooming Tempest to see a gleaming black Range Rover cutting across her freshly laid driveway, leaving deep mud tracks in its wake. Her hands stilled on the brush as she recognized the Westfield Stables logo emblazoned on the vehicle's side. Her heart quickened, but her expression remained impassive as Blake Westfield emerged, his Italian leather boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. Blake surveyed the modest property with undisguised contempt, adjusting his designer sunglasses as he approached. His gaze lingered on Morgan's swollen belly before shifting to Tempest, who stood surprisingly calm under Morgan's hand. The morning sun highlighted the mare's impressive conformation, making it impossible to deny her exceptional quality despite her troubled reputation. Morgan continued brushing Tempest's flank, refusing to acknowledge Blake until he stood directly before her. His cologne, too strong for a morning at the stables, mixed unpleasantly with the natural sense of hay and horse. He remarked with exaggerated concern about her ability to handle such a spirited animal in her condition, his words dripping with condescension as he gestured toward her pregnancy. Tempest shifted restlessly, sensing the tension between the humans. Morgan placed a steadying hand on the mare's neck, her touch instantly calming the animal in a way that caused Blake's eyebrows to rise slightly above his sunglasses. His surprise quickly morphed back into arrogance as he revealed the true purpose of his visit. The Royal Cup, the most prestigious race of the season, just 3 months away. Blake proposed a wager, with terms that made Morgan's breath catch. If Tempest lost, Blake would take ownership of the mare. If by some miracle they won, Morgan would receive Blake's champion stallion Midnight Commander, a horse worth millions, and the sire of Tempest herself. Morgan knew what this was. Not a challenge but a trap. The Royal Cup was for champions, for horses with years of training and professional jockeys. Tempest, for all her potential, was untested, untried, and considered unrideable by most. And Morgan herself, 7 months pregnant now, would be mere weeks postpartum by race day. The odds weren't just unfavorable, they were impossible. Blake's smile widened as he watched the calculations play across Morgan's face. This was his revenge for her embarrassing him at the auction, his way of reclaiming Tempest, while publicly humiliating the woman who had dared to challenge the Westfield dominance. He extended his hand, confident in her refusal, or better yet, her inevitable failure. Morgan looked from Blake's manicured hand to Tempest's intelligent eyes. The mare gazed back steadily, something like trust reflected there. After weeks of patient work, Morgan thought of all the times the Westfields had taken from her, her reputation, her career, her love. She would not let them take this too. With her chin lifted, Morgan Hayes took Blake Westfield's hand and sealed the challenge, knowing full well she had just committed to the impossible. Gray light filtered through morning mist as Morgan Hayes led Tempest around the modest training track she'd fashioned from the overgrown East pasture. Each step had become more laborious as her pregnancy advanced, her center of gravity shifting daily with the growing child within. Yet she pushed forward, one hand supporting her lower back, the other guiding Tempest with gentle pressure on the lead rope. They began before dawn each day, necessity rather than choice, as the summer heat became increasingly unbearable for both pregnant woman and training horse. Tempest's midnight coat gleamed with sweat as she responded to Morgan's subtle cues, building the endurance she would need for the Royal Cup. The mare's transformation over the past weeks had been remarkable, from unmanageable beast to attentive partner. Still, Morgan knew it wasn't enough. Not yet, not for the challenge that awaited them. As Tempest galloped around the makeshift track, Morgan's mind drifted to memories she'd fought to suppress. James Westfield's smile across a crowded winner's circle, his hand finding hers behind the stables, stolen moments between races, passionate nights at training competitions. She had been the rising star trainer, he the passionate younger son, more interested in riding than the family business. Their worlds had aligned perfectly until Blake discovered them. The Westfield patriarchy had made their position clear. No mere horse trainer, regardless of her talent, would be suitable for a Westfield heir. They had methodically dismantled her career, canceled her contracts, spread rumors of unprofessional conduct. James had disappeared to Europe shortly after, sent to manage their international interests. Whether he had fought for her or accepted his family's decree, Morgan never knew. His calls went unanswered, her pride too wounded to face him. By the time she discovered her pregnancy, the damage was complete. Tempest's anxious nickering snapped Morgan back to the present. The mare had pulled up short, her breathing labored, one leg slightly favored. Morgan's chest tightened with fear. An injury now would end everything before it began. That night, local veterinarian Sam Taylor arrived within minutes of her desperate call. His truck's headlights illuminated the stable yard as he examined Tempest with careful, practiced hands. His quiet competence calmed both horse and handler as he diagnosed a minor strain, easily remedied with rest and proper care. His kind eyes lingered on Morgan's exhausted face, concern evident as he insisted on checking her blood pressure before leaving. His gentle admonishment about overexertion somehow didn't feel patronizing coming from him. Across town, at the Westfield Country Club, champagne flowed as Blake regaled his associates with the tale of the pregnant woman, foolish enough to think she could compete in the Royal Cup. Laughter echoed as he assured them that nearby training facilities had been quietly informed that accommodating Morgan Hayes would be viewed unfavorably by the Westfield Empire. The Racing Commission members present nodded their understanding, raising glasses to toast the maintenance of proper standards. In her small farmhouse, Morgan reviewed training schedules by lamplight, one hand absently stroking her belly, while the other traced race maps. The odds mounted against her daily, her body growing heavier while resources grew scarcer. Yet each morning, she rose before dawn, determined to prove them all wrong. The summer heat pressed down on Hamilton Creek Farm like a physical weight as Morgan guided Tempest through increasingly complex training exercises. 8 months pregnant now, her doctor had been explicit during her last visit. The physical strain of horse training posed serious risks to both her and the baby. Morgan had nodded politely, then returned directly to the stables, her resolve unchanged. Some risks were necessary, and this battle had become about much more than a horse race. Tempest responded to Morgan's commands with growing precision, her movements fluid and powerful. The transformation from unmanageable beast to disciplined athlete was nearly complete. Yet shadows of the mare's troubled past emerged whenever unfamiliar men entered the training area. The sudden appearance of the feed delivery man had triggered a violent reaction just yesterday. Tempest rearing wildly, eyes wide with panic, nearly trampling the startled worker. Morgan recognized the signs of past abuse, another parallel between trainer and horse that strengthened their unusual bond. The sabotage began subtly. First, a crucial training gate was found broken one morning, its hinges mysteriously sheared despite being perfect the evening before. Then the regular feed supplier called to cancel their arrangement, citing vague business concerns that Morgan recognized as Westfield pressure tactics. The local farrier suddenly became too busy to fit Tempest into his schedule. Each obstacle forced Morgan to adapt, to stretch her dwindling resources further, to rise earlier and work later despite her increasingly unwieldy body. Word of Morgan Hayes' improbable comeback reached beyond local gossip. A small article in Racing Today mentioned the disgraced trainer's audacious attempt to enter the Royal Cup with an untested mare. The piece, clearly influenced by Westfield connections, was dismissive of her chances but inadvertently sparked interest. Former colleagues began appearing at her gate, exercise riders offering free assistance, a retired jockey volunteering training advice, grooms slipping her quality supplements when their employers weren't watching. Most surprising was the arrival of Harlan Thompson, her former mentor and the man who had first recognized her extraordinary gift with troubled horses. He had appeared one evening as Morgan struggled to adjust Tempest's training saddle, her swollen fingers fumbling with the buckles. Without a word, he had taken over the task, his weathered hands working with familiar efficiency. The next morning, he returned before dawn, offering insights on Tempest's gait that only his 50 years of experience could provide. The racing community began to fracture around the unfolding drama. Old guard trainers and owners closed ranks around the Westfields, offended by the very notion that a pregnant woman with a troubled horse could presume to enter their hallowed race. Yet others, particularly younger members of the racing world, found themselves drawn to Morgan's impossible quest. Small donations appeared anonymously: a premium mineral supplement, a specially designed racing bridle, a case of electrolyte formula. As race day approached, Morgan felt the baby shift within her, a reminder of all that hung in the balance. Each morning brought new challenges, each evening new aches in her overtaxed body. But with each sunrise came something else: Tempest's eager nickering as she approached, the growing confidence in the mare's stride, and the unwavering certainty that some battles must be fought regardless of the odds. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hamilton Creek Farm as Morgan adjusted Tempest's training saddle. The sound of tires on gravel barely registered until she glimpsed the unfamiliar luxury sedan through the stable doors. Her hands froze on the leather straps as a figure emerged, tall, confident, achingly familiar. James Westfield had returned from Europe. He stood at the stable entrance, his silhouette backlit by the setting sun, looking both exactly as she remembered and somehow changed. The European assignment had hardened his once boyish features, added silver threads to his dark hair. His eyes, however, widened with undisguised shock as they took in her pregnant form. The confrontation that followed stripped away 2 years of secrets and silence. James had never received her messages. Blake had intercepted them all, along with James's attempts to reach her. The painful truth unraveled between them: Blake's ultimatum that she disappear or face complete professional destruction, the family's determination to separate them, and the child growing within her that James never knew existed. James's face had drained of color as realization dawned. His brother's challenge suddenly made terrible sense, not just a bid to humiliate Morgan, but to acquire Tempest before James discovered the truth. A child meant complications, inheritance implications, scandal the Westfields couldn't control. As twilight deepened around them, another truth emerged. James had brought paperwork, Tempest's complete lineage records, that he'd obtained from racing authorities. Morgan's breath caught as she traced the mare's bloodline back 5 generations. There, listed as the broodmare's birthplace, was Hayes Hollow Farm, her family's former property, sold during financial hardships before her career took off. Tempest had been born on Hayes land, descended from the very bloodlines Morgan's grandfather had carefully cultivated before bankruptcy forced their sale to Westfield stables. The mare's erratic behavior, her response to Morgan's training methods, suddenly it all made sense. Tempest carried the rare Hayes bloodline markers, genetic traits that made horses exceptional but challenging, responsive only to handlers who understood their unique psychology. Blake's motivation crystallized with devastating clarity. The Westfield breeding program had been struggling to replicate the success of horses carrying Hayes bloodlines. Their champions were aging, and none of their carefully engineered breeding pairs had produced truly exceptional offspring. Tempest, with her Hayes lineage, was the key Blake needed, the genetic missing link that could revitalize their declining program. Morgan sank onto a hay bale, one hand protective over her belly, the other gripping Tempest's lineage papers. The stakes had shifted entirely. This wasn't just about a race or personal redemption anymore. This was about reclaiming what belonged to the Hayes legacy, both the child the Westfields had tried to erase and the bloodlines they had acquired through her family's misfortune. James stood silently before her, the weight of his family's deception visible in his shoulders. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, and with it, any illusion that the Royal Cup was merely a race. It was now a battlefield where generations of wrongs would finally be addressed. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Morgan made her final night check on Tempest. The Royal Cup was less than 12 hours away. Rain pattered against the stable roof, creating a soothing rhythm that belied the tension coiled within Morgan's body. She ran her hands along Tempest's legs, checking for any sign of heat or swelling. When the first contraction seized her, the pain was sudden, shocking in its intensity, forcing her to grip the stall door to remain standing. It was too soon, nearly 3 weeks before her due date. Morgan reached for her phone, only to realize it remained in the farmhouse, charging beside her bed. Another contraction ripped through her, stronger than the first. She sank to her knees in the fresh straw, trying to calculate how far apart they were coming. Too close, much too close for a first labor. The stable door had swung shut with the rising wind, its latch clicking into place, trapping her inside as the storm intensified. Tempest nickered softly, her ears pricked forward as she watched Morgan struggle. When the third contraction came, Morgan couldn't suppress her cry of pain. The mare's reaction was immediate and unexpected. She positioned herself between Morgan and the stable door, her powerful body creating a protective barrier. Each time Morgan moaned, Tempest responded with gentle sounds, as if offering comfort. Across town, the pre-race meeting at the Royal Cup Pavilion had begun. Morgan's absence raised eyebrows, particularly from Harlan Thompson, who checked his watch repeatedly. Her neighbor, Edwin Foster, a retired jockey who had initially scoffed at her attempts to train Tempest, felt the first stirrings of concern. Morgan Hayes had never missed a commitment, regardless of her condition. Her empty chair spoke volumes. The search party formed quickly. Edwin, Harlan, and several grooms who had come to respect Morgan's grit. They arrived at Hamilton Creek Farm to find her truck in the drive. But the farmhouse dark and empty. The storm had intensified, rain lashing against them as they approached the stables. Edwin was the first to hear her cries between thunderclaps. Inside, they found a scene none would ever forget. Morgan lay in the fresh straw, her face contorted in pain, while Tempest stood guard, allowing only Sam the veterinarian to approach when he arrived moments later. The mare, who had once been deemed unmanageable, now positioned herself as sentinel, ears flattening when anyone moved too quickly toward her suffering trainer. Sam's emergency medical training from his years before veterinary school took over. With calm efficiency, he organized the impromptu delivery room, clean towels from the tack room, hot water, the first aid kit with its sterile supplies. Morgan's labor progressed with frightening speed, her body determined to bring forth new life beneath the same roof where she was fighting to rebuild her own. As midnight approached, the stable filled with the powerful cry of a newborn girl. Morgan held her daughter against her chest, exhausted but triumphant. When headlights cut through the rain-soaked night, Blake Westfield stepped into the stable, his expression shifting from smug certainty to shock as he took in the scene before him. He had come to claim forfeit. Certain Morgan's absence from the meeting signaled withdrawal. From her makeshift bed of hay, sweat still glistening on her brow, and her newborn cradled in her arms, Morgan met his gaze without flinching. Tomorrow, she would race. Her daughter, born on the eve of battle, would be named Victory, regardless of what happened on the track. The message was clear. She had already won something far more precious than any cup or purse. Blake retreated into the storm without a word, leaving Morgan surrounded by the unlikely community that had formed around her impossible quest. Outside, the rain began to ease. Dawn would come soon enough. Morning sunlight bathed Westfield Downs in golden hues. As the crowd gathered for the Royal Cup, conversations halted mid-sentence when Morgan Hayes appeared at the entrance. Her appearance shocking, even those who had heard the rumors. She walked with slow, careful steps, her newborn daughter cradled against her chest in a makeshift sling, while her free hand led Tempest, whose coat gleamed like polished obsidian in the morning light. Dark circles shadowed Morgan's eyes, her face pale from the night's ordeal, yet she moved with quiet determination that commanded attention. Whispers rippled through the gathering, like wind through summer grass. The pregnant troublemaker had delivered a child mere hours ago and still dared to show her face. Mockery turned to astonishment as Morgan proceeded to the registration tent, Tempest following with unusual docility, the mare's ears flicking attentively toward the infant's occasional coos. Race officials clustered around Morgan, their expressions a mixture of concern and disbelief. One gestured toward her weakened state, another toward the rulebook clutched in his hand. Participating in such a demanding race so soon after childbirth wasn't just foolhardy, it bordered on dangerous. Medical concerns were raised, liability issues mentioned in urgent tones. Morgan listened without expression, her hand never leaving Tempest's lead rope. Sam Taylor stepped forward from the small group that had accompanied Morgan to the track. His offer to ride in her place silenced the officials momentarily. A licensed veterinarian with former professional riding experience could satisfy their safety concerns while allowing Tempest to compete. Morgan nodded her gratitude, carefully transferring her newborn to Harlan Thompson's waiting arms. The solution seemed perfect until Sam approached Tempest with the racing saddle. The mare's demeanor transformed instantly, ears flattened, nostrils flared, powerful muscles tensed to strike. When James Westfield attempted the same, the reaction intensified. 3 more experienced jockeys approached. 3 more were rejected, with increasing agitation. Tempest would accept no rider but Morgan. A race official raised his hands in defeat. Without a suitable rider, Tempest must be withdrawn. The challenge was over before it began. Morgan's journey had been for nothing. The crowd that had gathered to witness the spectacle began to disperse, some disappointed, others secretly relieved that order would be maintained. Then Morgan handed her child to Sam and stepped toward Tempest. With practiced movements that belied her physical exhaustion, she removed the mare's halter completely. The crowd stilled, breaths held as Morgan whispered something into Tempest's ear. What followed silenced even the most skeptical observers. Morgan walked toward the practice track, Tempest following without restraint. At the starting position, Morgan gestured almost imperceptibly. Tempest broke into a gallop, running the exact racing line, changing leads at the precise moments required for the complex Royal Cup course. Another subtle hand signal and the mare returned, coming to a perfect stop beside her trainer. Without saddle, without bridle, without voice commands, the communication between woman and horse transcended conventional training. It spoke of something deeper, a connection that rendered traditional rules meaningless. The officials exchanged glances. The crowd pressed forward. The impossible suddenly seemed possible. The starting gates crashed open, and 12 thoroughbreds exploded onto the track, hooves thundering against dirt as the Royal Cup began. Morgan Hayes, her body still weak from childbirth, crouched low over Tempest's neck. Pain shot through her with every stride, but she narrowed her focus to the track ahead. They had started poorly, trapped behind a wall of competitors, the black mare unused to the claustrophobic press of professional racing. From the owner's box, Blake Westfield raised his champagne flute in a mocking toast. The sight of Morgan wobbling in the saddle confirmed what he had predicted. Her foolish determination would end in humiliation. Beside him, racing commissioners chuckled appreciatively, their investment in the Westfield stables secure as the family's champion horse Thunderclap surged to an early lead. The first turn came and went with Tempest boxed in, tightly, unable to find space. Morgan fought to maintain position, while images flashed through her exhausted mind. Her father teaching her to ride on their struggling farm, her first win as a trainer, the pride in James's eyes when she outperformed every expectation, the devastating meeting with Reginald Westfield, where her world collapsed. These memories burned like fuel in her veins, each one propelling her forward, despite the screaming protests of her body. At the halfway mark, Tempest's ears flicked back, catching Morgan's whispered encouragement. The mare had been running conservatively, learning the rhythm of professional racing with each powerful stride. Now, as though responding to some silent command, she surged toward a narrow opening between two tiring horses. The maneuver was dangerous, requiring precision that seemed impossible for an untested horse. Yet Tempest slipped through cleanly, her midnight coat gleaming with exertion as they advanced 3 positions in a heartbeat. The announcer's voice rose an octave as he called the unexpected move. The crowd, initially dismissive of the pregnant woman's folly, now pressed against railings to witness what was unfolding. Tempest passed another competitor, then another, her stride lengthening as Morgan guided her with the lightest touch. They were 5th, now then 4th, then impossibly 3rd as they rounded the final turn. Blake's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. Thunderclap maintained the lead, but his jockey was already using the whip, a sign of concern this early in the final stretch. Between them ran Westfield's secondary entry, creating a buffer that seemed insurmountable. Yet Tempest continued to accelerate, her powerful legs eating up ground with each stride, her breathing strong while others began to falter. In the stands, James Westfield rose to his feet, his eyes fixed on the woman who carried his child, who now carried his family's legacy across the track with unstoppable determination. In the medical tent, Sam held Victory against his chest, the newborn strangely quiet, as though sensing the importance of what was unfolding. Tempest drew even with the second-place horse, then surged past. Only Thunderclap remained ahead, less than a length separating them with 50 yards remaining. The champion horse sensed the challenge, responding to his jockey's desperate urging. But Tempest was running for more than a trophy. She ran for her trainer, for redemption, for the Hayes legacy. They crossed the finish line, a half-length ahead, the impossible made reality by the unbreakable bond between a woman who refused to surrender and a horse that no one else could ride. The sunlight danced across the newly painted sign at the entrance to what had once been Hamilton Creek Farm, Hayes Revival Stables. It proclaimed in bold lettering, a testament to redemption against impossible odds. 6 months had passed since the Royal Cup, but visitors still arrived daily, hoping to glimpse the woman who had shocked the racing world by delivering a child and winning a championship within 24 hours. Journalists from every major equestrian publication had descended like locusts in those first weeks, their stories transforming Morgan Hayes from disgraced outcast to living legend. The photograph of her crossing the finish line, exhausted, determined, triumphant, had appeared on magazine covers worldwide, becoming an instant symbol of female strength and perseverance. The aftermath had been swift and far-reaching. Blake Westfield's carefully constructed empire began crumbling the very night of the race when James publicly revealed the family's systematic destruction of Morgan's career and their attempt to conceal his child. By month's end, James had leveraged his inheritance and family connections to wrest control of Westfield's stables from his brother and father, instituting sweeping ethical reforms that sent ripples through the industry. Morgan declined the numerous sponsorship offers and television appearances that followed her victory. Instead, she channeled her renewed influence into establishing a program for troubled horses and riders seeking second chances. Tempest became the living symbol of the program's philosophy, that patience, understanding, and genuine connection could transform even the most damaged spirits. Sam Taylor's veterinary practice had gradually relocated to the expanding facilities at Hayes Revival, his careful attention to Tempest's pregnant form, for she had been bred to Midnight Commander following the race, fulfilling the terms of the wager, evolved into daily visits, then shared meals, then shared sunsets on the farmhouse porch. His gentle manner with Victory, now a curious 6-month-old, with her mother's determined eyes, sealed a bond that promised a future none of them had dared imagine months before. The transformation extended beyond the personal. Former critics now sent their problematic horses to Morgan for rehabilitation, Young women traveled from across the country to train under her guidance. Even Reginald Westfield, humbled by his family's disgrace, had visited once, his unspoken apology accepted with quiet dignity as Morgan showed him his granddaughter for the first time. On this particular evening, as the setting sun painted the Kentucky hills in amber hues, Morgan walked the blooming fields of her expanding property. Victory rode contentedly in a carrier on her back, while beside them Tempest guided her wobbly-legged foal through the sweet grass. The mare's coat gleamed with health, her eyes calm and trusting as she matched her pace to Morgan's. Behind them, the stable lights winked on as Sam prepared evening feed for the dozen rescued horses now under their care. Ahead lay pastures being readied for expansion, the future stretching out with possibilities previously unimaginable. Morgan Hayes, once laughed at and dismissed, now walked tall through the empire she had built, not of wealth or prestige, but of second chances and healing hearts. Thank you so much for following this incredible journey to its conclusion. If you were moved by Morgan's determination and triumph against all odds, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that touch your heart and lift your spirit. Your support helps us continue bringing these emotional tales of redemption and courage. What was your favorite moment in Morgan's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.